Welcome to the Sleepy Scribe. Your endless internet wandering has brought you here, and hopefully you can finally sleep to today's topic. Now, before we begin, comment where you are listening from, and how late it is where you are. It is so very interesting to see how far and wide people come to listen. Lastly, if you enjoy these videos, please subscribe, it would be very appreciated. Now, let us begin. The air above the highest peaks of Olympus shimmered that evening, as if the mountain itself were holding its breath. Clouds gathered in strange, rolling shapes, folding and curling like the silken robes of 1,000 dancers, their edges stained gold by the dying sun. From far below, shepherds glanced upward and whispered that the gods were restless, though none dared speak too loudly for fear their words might be carried to ears that did not forgive. In the great hall of Zeus, the marble columns glowed with the warmth of the setting light, each one taller than the masts of mortal ships, carved with the deeds of gods who strode through chaos long before the first man ever lifted his eyes to the sky. The king of the gods sat upon his throne of storm cloud and polished gold, fingers drumming against the armrest with the faint crackle of distant lightning. His eyes, the color of a brewing tempest, were fixed on the horizon, but his thoughts wandered far beyond it. Hera sat beside him, her beauty sharp as the edge of a spear, her crown catching the last rays of daylight like a circlet of captured fire. She smiled, but it was a smile without warmth, for the whispers of the fates had reached her not in words, but in the twitch of the threads they wove. A child was coming, one unlike any before. That child would be the son of Zeus, but not of her, and the insult burned like a coal hidden beneath her tongue. Below Olympus, in a palace where mortal walls shook when the wind rose too high, a queen lay restless in her chamber. Alcmene, daughter of Ryan, had the grace of a river at dawn and the quiet strength of a stone weathering centuries of rain. She did not yet know that tonight her life would be stolen into a story the bards would sing for all the ages. Zeus, wrapped in shadow, descended from Olympus as a falcon might drop from the clouds, the air bending around him in deference to the power he carried. He came not in his own form, but cloaked in the likeness of Alcmene's husband, Amphitryon, who even now rode far away at war. The gods rarely considered mortal hearts in their games, and Zeus was no different. His mind burned only with desire and the thrill of shaping a destiny. In her chamber, Alcmene looked up, startled, and saw her husband returned early, his voice as she knew it, his face lit with the smile she had missed in long nights of loneliness. She welcomed him, and the torches guttered as if bowing to the moment, the air heavy with the strange sweetness of divinity mingling with mortal breath. Above them, Hera's eyes narrowed until they were slits of molten gold. She had seen this before. She knew how the seed of Zeus, once planted, grew into a thorn in her heart. Each child of his another reminder that even the queen of the heavens could not chain the lightning's will. She would not strike tonight. No, vengeance was a dish she preferred served with time enough for the victim to believe themselves safe. The night stretched long and strange, and in the morning the sun seemed to rise slower than usual, as though it, too, wished to watch the threads of fate tighten around the mortal queen. 9 months passed with the quiet inevitability of the turning seasons, and the child was born under a sky heavy with omens. The midwives whispered of the boy's size, his grasp like iron even as he first touched the world, his cry loud enough to make the rafters shiver. He was named Hercules, glory of Hera, though the name would taste bitter in the goddess's mouth. Hera herself, feigning benevolence, sent down 2 great serpents into the cradle, their scales glistening like polished emerald under the torchlight, tongues flicking to taste the air heavy with new life. But the infant only laughed, clutching each serpent in his tiny fists, squeezing until their bodies fell limp, their coils unraveling like discarded ropes. The servants crossed themselves, the midwives fled, and Alcmene held her child close, her heart a storm of pride and dread. Hera, watching from above, did not rage, not yet. She only smiled that same cold, perfect smile, for she knew the road ahead would be long, and pain could be woven into every step of it. The first years of Hercules' life were a curious blend of peace and the faint, ever-present hum of something greater moving just beyond the edge of sight. Alcmene raised him as best she could, with the patience of one who knew her child would never truly belong to her alone. He was strong before most boys could even walk. Once, when barely 2 years old, he lifted a heavy bronze pot from the hearth and toddled across the room as if it were a basket of figs, leaving the servants to stare with open mouths. The villagers began to murmur about him in the marketplace. Some called him blessed, others whispered the more dangerous word, cursed. For every act of wonder, there seemed a shadow cast. A neighbor's prized bull broke its tether one day, rampaging toward the olive groves, only to be caught by the tiny hands of Hercules, who held its horns until the beast snorted in bewilderment and calmed. Yet later that same week, a child tripped while playing near him and broke an arm. Though Hercules had meant no harm, the mother looked at him as though she had seen a wolf among lambs. It was Hero's unseen hand that kept these small storms swirling around him, little reminders that his life would never pass as that of a normal child. She could not undo his birth, but she could ensure he never knew the ease of forgetting what he was. Amphitryon returned from war to find a son who seemed more like a young ox in strength than a boy. The man, proud but cautious, decided that such raw force must be tempered, for an untrained blade cuts friend as often as foe. He called on the finest tutors and warriors to shape the child's body and mind. Eurytus, famed archer and king, came to teach him the bow, his hands guiding Hercules' much smaller ones until the boy's fingers remembered the tension and release. From Linus, a master of the lyre, he learned music, though Hercules' patience for delicate strings was not as strong as his grip. More than once he snapped them in frustration, sending the poor instrument groaning in protest. Wrestling came naturally, and Chiron the wise centaur instructed him in the art of reading the stars, knowing the paths of beasts, and tempering power with thought. But Hero's jealousy does not sleep, and one day, during a lesson with Linus, a sudden spark of anger seized Hercules. Linus had chided him for playing poorly, perhaps with more sharpness than kindness, and in a heartbeat Hercules struck without realizing the force he wielded. Linus fell and did not rise again, and though the boy's eyes filled with horror at what he had done, the damage was carved into the tale of his life. Amphitryon, fearing the growing storm inside his son, sent him away from the city to the countryside, where endless hills and fields could drink up his strength. There he worked the land, wrestled with lions that prowled too close to the flocks, and ran barefoot over sharp stones without flinching. In these years he learned not only to fight, but to endure, how to carry a yoke across miles, how to stand unyielding in the rain until the storm passed. Still, there was a restlessness in him, a longing like the pull of the tide for the shore. He could not name it, but it was the whisper of fate in his blood, telling him that his hands were not meant only for ploughing or guarding sheep. It was during these years that he met Iphicles, his twin in the eyes of the world but not in truth, for Iphicles was mortal, the son of Amphitryon alone. They wrestled in the dirt, raced through groves, and hunted together. Yet even Iphicles felt the difference between them as one feels the heat of the sun compared to the warmth of a hearth. Once, during a hunt, they cornered a wild boar, tusks gleaming with spittle, eyes red with fury. Iphicles hesitated, but Hercules stepped forward, barehanded, and caught the beast by its tusks, forcing it to the ground until it lay panting in surrender. He laughed then, a sound half joy, half defiance, and the forest seemed to listen. Somewhere far above, Hera listened too, her fingers tightening on the armrest of her throne. She would let him grow, let his pride root deep in the soil of his youth, so that when the time came to tear him down, the fall would be all the more satisfying. The seasons turned, and with them Hercules' body grew into something that made even seasoned warriors glance twice when he passed. By the time he was in his late teens, his shoulders seemed carved from the same marble that lined temple walls, his hands rough and scarred like those of a veteran soldier, yet his eyes still held the restless glint of a youth not entirely sure where to place all the storms inside him. He could swing an axe through the trunk of an olive tree with a single strike, lift a cart from the mud while its owner stared, speechless, and throw a javelin so far it seemed to vanish into the blue haze where the earth met the sky. But for all this strength, there was a certain clumsiness to him in everyday life, the way a man with enormous feet might forget to step lightly indoors. Once, while visiting the home of a kindly old shepherd, Hercules reached to pat the man's back in greeting and instead sent him stumbling forward into a barrel of wine, nearly drowning him in his own winter stores. The shepherd forgave him, laughing through coughs, but stories like this began to follow the young man from village to village. It was around this time that Amphitryon decided the boy's strength needed sharper purpose, and so he sent him to train with the army of Thebes. There Hercules learned the discipline of ranks, the thud of 100 shields moving as one, the weight of bronze armor pressing against his shoulders under the sun. He proved himself quickly, perhaps too quickly, for in their first mock battle he accidentally snapped the shaft of a captain's spear with a careless parry, earning a mixture of awe and irritation from the veterans. Still, the men warmed to him, for he could drink them under the table and still carry half of them home without complaint, whistling as if burden meant nothing to him. Yet Hero's shadow lengthened with his reputation. One summer, When the hills were dry and the air heavy with the scent of dust, word reached Thebes of a lion prowling near Mount Cithaeron, a beast so large its roar was said to echo off 3 valleys at once. Cattle were vanishing, shepherds were afraid to leave their huts, and the king offered rich rewards to any who could slay it. Hercules, not yet the hero sung in every tavern, saw in this a chance to prove his worth beyond campfire stories. He set out with nothing but his bow, a quiver of arrows, and a stout club he had carved himself from the trunk of an ash tree. The journey up the mountain was steep, the rocks loose underfoot, the air filled with the buzzing of unseen insects. By nightfall he found signs of the lion, enormous paw prints pressed deep into the earth, tufts of tawny fur caught on low branches, and the sharp, coppery scent of blood lingering in the air. He followed until the moon was high, its pale light making the world strange and silver. Then he heard it, the low, rolling growl that made the hairs on his arms rise. The lion emerged from the darkness as if the shadows themselves had given it form, its eyes 2 burning coals, its mane a halo of wild, tangled gold. Hercules loosed an arrow. It struck, but the shaft splintered against the beast's hide as though it were stone. The lion roared, a sound that shook the marrow of his bones, and charged. Hercules did not flee. He dropped the bow, raised his club, and met the beast head-on. The impact rattled the night, man and lion tumbling together in a blur of claws and muscle. For a heartbeat, Hercules thought the weight of it might crush him, but then the tide turned. With a grip like iron, he seized the lion's throat, twisting until its roars became a rattling gasp and its body grew still. He rose, chest heaving, staring down at the great shape sprawled before him. In that moment, he felt something stirred deep in his blood, a certainty, fierce and unshakable, that his life would not be one of quiet fields or modest victories. He skinned the lion with the point of his own arrows, the hide thick and stubborn, and draped it across his shoulders, the head serving as a hood that framed his face in a crown of fangs. When he returned to Thebes, the city buzzed with talk of the young warrior in the lion's cloak. Amphitryon embraced him with pride, but in the shadow of Olympus, Hera sat unmoving, her gaze fixed on the flickering threads of his fate. Let him grow strong, she thought, for even the mightiest oak can be felled if you rot it from the roots. Hercules' fame after the Cithaeron lion spread faster than the autumn winds that stripped leaves from the trees, and with fame came the curiosity of those who saw in him not just a warrior, but a figure who might shape the destiny of kingdoms. Amphitryon, proud but cautious, decided his son's gifts must be sharpened in every way, not merely in strength. To this end, he summoned the finest teachers from across the lands, men whose names were spoken with respect in both palaces and taverns, each tasked with teaching the young demigod a skill that might temper his raw power. Eurytus, master of the bow, came first, his lean frame and keen eyes making him see more hawk than man. In the practice yard, under a sun that turned the dust golden, he taught Hercules the art of drawing a bowstring smoothly, the patience to breathe before release, and the humility to know that not every target falls at the first attempt. But patience was a stubborn weed in Hercules' soul. Once, after loosing an arrow and missing the mark entirely, he muttered that the wind had been against him, prompting Eurytus to chuckle and say, "The wind is against all men, boy, it is your aim that must learn to fight it." Hercules scowled, but the words stayed with him longer than he cared to admit. Linus, the gentle yet sharp-tongued master of the lyre, followed. The music room smelled faintly of cedar and beeswax, the strings of the instruments catching the light like spider silk. Linus hoped that music might smooth the rough edges of a spirit forged in fire. For a time, it worked. Hercules' thick fingers found their way to gentle melodies, his deep voice humming in tune. But one afternoon, after particularly clumsy pluck that snapped a string, Linus scolded him with more bite than grace, and something old and dangerous stirred in Hercules' chest. The outburst was over in a flash, a shove, a cry. The master sprawled on the ground, unmoving, and the young man's face drained of all color as he realized what he had done. The city judged it an accident, but the whispers began to cling to him like burrs. Amphitryon, fearing the city walls were closing in on his son, sent him to the countryside once more, not as punishment but as refuge. There, Hercules found a new teacher in Chiron, the wise centaur whose knowledge was as deep as the rivers that ran through the land. Chiron taught him to read the constellations and to hear in the wind the stories it carried from far-off places. Under Chiron's patient gaze, Hercules learned to track beasts without disturbing the forest, to find water by the taste of the soil, to read the shifting moods of the sky. Yet even in these moments of peace, His strength had a way of announcing itself. Once, when they came upon a boulder blocking a narrow pass, Chiron suggested they go around. Hercules, grinning, set down his pack, braced himself, and rolled the boulder aside as if it were a stubborn sheep refusing to leave its pen. Chiron shook his head but said nothing, for he knew the boy's power was as much a part of him as his beating heart. There was also Castor and Pollux, twin brothers who took it upon themselves to teach Hercules the intricacies of combat. From Castor he learned horsemanship, mastering the subtle cues of the reins until horse and rider moved as one. From Pollux he learned boxing, though more than once Hercules' enthusiasm sent his sparring partner flying into the dust. Pollux would groan and rise again, muttering that training with Hercules was like trying to wrestle a temple pillar. But perhaps the most unexpected lesson came from Autolycus, a thief so skilled he could steal the sandals from your feet while you were still wearing them. Amphitryon thought a little cunning might balance his son's straightforward strength. Hercules learned to move silently, to notice the smallest shift in a man's expression, to value information as much as weapons. Of course, when Hercules tried to sneak up on Chiron as practice, the centaur simply said without looking up, "You walk like thunder, even the stones hear you coming." Hercules laughed then, a rare, easy laugh, and for a while it seemed the storm in his nature might be tamed by such moments. But far above, Hera still watched. Every skill he learned, every friend he made, every small victory he tasted, these were knots she would one day cut, one by one, until the tapestry of his life unraveled beneath him. Hera's wrath, long simmering beneath a mask of calm, finally broke with the subtle cruelty of a winter frost creeping through the roots of a proud tree. Hercules, for all his growing strength and wisdom, was not prepared for the darkness that would soon twist his fate. One afternoon, in a quiet village where the olive branches swayed lazily in the warm breeze, he returned to find his home strangely silent. The hearth was cold, the air heavy with an unspoken dread. Without warning, a madness seized him, a storm raging behind his eyes, turning friend into foe, love into shadow. In his frenzy, he lashed out, shattering what he held most dear, his hands no longer those of a protector but of destruction. When the madness lifted, the horror of his deeds settled over him like a leaden cloak. The villagers, once his allies, turned wary, whispering that the son of Zeus was touched by a darkness no man could fight alone. Amphitryon, heartbroken, sought counsel from the oracles, desperate for a path to cleanse his son's name and soul. The Pythia at Delphi, her voice trembling like wind through reeds, spoke of penance, of labors that could wash away even the deepest stains. It was here that Hercules' true journey began, not only of strength, but of redemption, trial, and a quest that would echo through eternity. Each labor a step further from the madness, each monster faced a piece of the shadow wrestled into light. And yet, even as he prepared to meet these tasks, the gods watched, some with hope, others with grudging respect, and Hera, ever patient, with a smile that held the promise of storms yet to come. The sun hung low over the rolling hills of Nemea, painting the sky in bruised purples and burning golds as Hercules approached the cursed land. The villagers spoke in hushed tones of the beast that prowled their woods, an enormous lion whose hide was said to be impervious to spear or arrow, a creature born of shadow and nightmare. Its roar echoed through the valleys like the bellow of a storm, sending birds flapping wild into the darkening sky. Hercules tightened the straps of his worn leather sandals, feeling the weight of his task settle over him like the cool evening mist. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, and somewhere close, the faint rustle of leaves hinted at the unseen presence of the lion itself. He had faced beasts before, but this was different, a creature not born merely of flesh and bone, but woven from the very fabric of terror that gripped the hearts of men. He moved quietly, each step measured and deliberate, as if the forest demanded respect for the coming confrontation. Suddenly, the ground trembled beneath his feet. A great shadow leapt from the underbrush, muscles rippling like waves beneath golden fur that shimmered even in the fading light. The lion's eyes burned with an ancient fury, and it charged with a roar that shook the trees. Hercules dodged, feeling the rush of hot breath and the snap of jaws just inches from his arm. His arrows shattered harmlessly against the beast's impenetrable hide, and his sword glanced off like a thunderclap lost in a storm. Realizing brute force alone would not win this fight, Hercules dropped his weapons and seized the lion with his bare hands. The battle became a furious dance of strength and will, the two locked in a struggle where neither could yield. His fingers found purchase beneath the beast's jaw, his arms wrapped tight around its neck like a living noose. The lion twisted and bucked, but Hercules' grip was relentless, and slowly, inexorably, he crushed the life from the monstrous creature. When at last the great beast lay still, Hercules stood victorious, his chest heaving, the forest falling silent as if paying tribute. He skinned the lion with his own hands, the hide thick and tough, and fashioned for himself a cloak that would become both armor and symbol, an emblem of a hero who faced darkness and emerged unbroken. Draped in the lion's pelt, Hercules walked back to the village, the weight of the skin as heavy as the destiny settling upon his shoulders. Around him, whispers grew into songs, and the world began to know the name of the man who would become legend. The swampy marshes of Lerna stretched like a dark mirror beneath a sky swollen with heavy clouds, the air thick with the tang of stagnant water and the distant cries of unseen creatures. Hercules approached the fetid ground with wary steps, the memory of the Nemean Lion's unyielding hide still heavy on his skin like a mantle of iron. Here, the challenge was unlike any he had faced, a creature not only fierce but cunning, its breath fetid, its many heads rising like twisted branches from a monstrous, serpentine neck. The Lernian Hydra was a beast born of the ancient darkness, its heads writhing in unholy dance, each a whisper of death. As Hercules drew near, the water rippled and hissed, and the air pulsed with the creature's terrible power. His heart pounded in time with the slow, deliberate lapping of the swamp's edge. He knew the tales. Cut one head and two more would sprout in its place, a seemingly endless torment crafted by the gods themselves to test the mettle of any who dared confront it. Armed with his sword and a burning resolve, Hercules waded into the murky depths, the mud sucking at his sandals as if the earth itself sought to claim him. The Hydra's many eyes opened, glowing with malice, and it lunged with a fury born of millennia of rage and hunger. Their battle was a whirlwind of strikes and dodges, steel ringing against scale, the sickening snap of jaws inches from flesh. Each time Hercules severed a head, two more erupted in its place, writhing and hissing like angry flames licking at dry timber. Realizing brute force alone would doom him, Hercules called upon his faithful nephew Iolaus, who stood at the swamp's edge with a blazing torch. As Hercules struck each head, Iolaus scorched the neck stump, cauterizing the wound to prevent regrowth. The teamwork turned the tide of the battle, the fiery torchlight dancing across scales slick with swamp water and blood. The Hydra's heads writhed and shrieked, but slowly, one by one, they fell silent, until at last only a single immortal head remained, its gaze fixed and unblinking. Hercules seized it with hands that had known both tenderness and destruction, twisting and crushing until even that last vestige of the creature's terrible life was extinguished. Exhausted, he stood among the reeds, the swamp eerily still around him as if the very earth sighed in relief. He bound the immortal head and carried it back, knowing its power was not to be underestimated but must be kept from harm's way. Each labor etched deeper into the legend of Hercules, weaving a tapestry of strength, cunning, and a will unbroken by despair. Above, the gods watched, some with envy, some with grudging respect, and Hera, still patient, still scheming, her smile never quite reaching her eyes. The golden sun shimmered low over the vast forests of Arcadia, where the air was thick with the scent of pine resin and the whisper of ancient leaves stirred by a gentle breeze. Hercules stepped beneath the canopy, his senses sharp as a hawk's, for he knew this task required not only strength but the softest touch and the patience of the wild itself. The Ceryneian hind was no ordinary beast. It was a creature of grace and swiftness, its golden antlers shining like the first light of dawn, and its hooves so light they seemed barely to touch the earth. The creature was sacred to Artemis, the huntress goddess, and to capture it without harm was a challenge whispered in the wind as nearly impossible. Days passed as Hercules tracked the hind through tangled underbrush and over mossy stones, following the faintest of prints and listening for the delicate rustle of leaves that marked its passage. At times, the hind seemed a spirit rather than flesh, darting between shafts of light and shadow, teasing the hunter with glimpses too quick to catch. On one afternoon, when the sun dipped behind a veil of clouds and the forest fell into a hush, Hercules finally spotted the hind drinking from a crystal-clear stream. His breath caught, and his muscles tensed with the thrill of the hunt, but he knew this was no battle of brawn. Moving with care, he lowered his club, choosing instead the quiet step and steady hand, inching closer as the creature lifted its head, eyes wide and unafraid. The moment stretched, delicate as a spider's web glistening with dew. With a swift, gentle motion, Hercules snared the hind with a golden net gifted by the gods themselves, careful not to hurt even a hair. The hind struggled briefly but then seemed to understand, its wild spirit softened by the strength and kindness in Hercules' eyes. Yet, as he prepared to carry his prize back, the forest itself seemed to hold its breath. The sound of swift footsteps broke the silence, and there appeared Artemis, radiant and fierce, her silver bow poised with tension. Her gaze, sharp as the arrow she loosed, fixed on Hercules with both anger and challenge. "You dare to touch what is sacred to me," she demanded, voice echoing like the call of the wild. Hercules met her gaze steadily, explaining the command that bound him, the trials he must endure. Artemis, after a moment that felt like eternity, lowered her bow, her expression softening. "Then prove your respect, mortal. Let this capture be not of violence but of reverence." With that, she vanished into the woods, leaving Hercules to carry the hind gently, the weight of the sacred trust settling on his shoulders. The labor was complete, not through conquest but through honor, a lesson in humility woven into the tale of a hero. Above, the gods observed, whispers of admiration mixing with the ever-present watchfulness of Hera, whose plans twisted ever deeper into the fabric of Hercules' fate. The winter air bit sharply across the slopes of Mount Erymanthos, where frosted pines stood silent sentinels over fields dusted white with snow. Hercules pulled his cloak tighter around his broad shoulders as he trudged through the icy underbrush, the crunch of frozen earth beneath his boots a steady rhythm in the quiet morning. The Erymanthian boar was a creature of fierce reputation, massive, wild, and cunning, with tusks like curved daggers and eyes that burned with untamed fury. It had terrorized the countryside for years, rooting up fields, scattering flocks, and challenging even the bravest hunters to face its wrath. This labor demanded not only strength but cunning, for the boar's charge was swift and deadly, and many who sought it found only broken bones and bitter defeat. Hercules moved with the patience of a mountain stream, tracking the beast's path through broken branches and overturned soil. The scent of earth and pine mingled with a faint trace of musk that marked the boar's passage. After days of silent pursuit, he found it at a frozen pond, its breath misting in the cold air as it snorted and pawed the ice. Without hesitation, Hercules sprang into action, wielding his great club with the force of a thunderclap. The boar charged, a living battering ram fueled by fury and survival. Their clash sent sprays of snow and ice flying like shattered glass, the ground trembling beneath their battle. Hercules dodged a lethal tusk and grabbed the creature's bristling maner, muscles straining as he wrestled the beast to the ground. The struggle was fierce, but the hero's strength proved greater, and soon the boar lay subdued, its wild eyes dimming with reluctant surrender. Hercules bound the creature with strong ropes, careful to avoid harm, and carried it back to King Eurystheus, the man whose commands had set these labors in motion. The king, who had been hiding in terror behind a bronze jar, leapt from his hiding place in disbelief, his cries of astonishment echoing through the hall. The boar, once a symbol of fear, was now a captive trophy, and with it, Hercules added another thread to the growing legend woven around his name. Yet beneath the triumph, the shadow of Hera's wrath lingered, a reminder that this journey was far from over. The sun had barely risen over the plains of Elis when Hercules arrived at the gates of King Augeas's palace, the morning light gilding the towering columns and sprawling courtyards like molten gold spilled over marble. The air carried the heavy scent of earth and dung, a thick perfume that spoke of the labor ahead with unyielding honesty. Augeas, a man of immense wealth and pride, ruled his lands with a gaze as sharp as a falcon's and a voice that rolled like distant thunder. Yet even his confidence faltered when he looked out over the Augean stables, vast pens stretching farther than the eye could see, filled with the dung of thousands of cattle, untouched for decades. The stench was said to be so fierce that no man had dared clean the stables in 30 years, and the task had become a symbol of impossible toil, whispered in hushed voices by farmers and servants alike. Hercules stood at the edge of this monstrous mess, the ground soft and quaking beneath his feet. The challenge was not of battle or brute force alone, but of ingenuity and perseverance, a test that would weigh not just on his muscles but on his mind. Augeas, skeptical yet bound by his oath to Eurystheus, offered a wager. If Hercules could clean the stables in a single day, the king would grant him a great reward, but if he failed, he would forfeit much of his promised glory. The young hero smiled beneath his lion's cloak, not out of arrogance but because the challenge ignited a fire within, a chance to prove that strength and wisdom could dance together as partners. As dawn deepened into morning, Hercules surveyed the vast network of stables and dung heaps, the foul air pressing like a living thing against his chest. He could feel the eyes of the gods upon him, some curious, some amused, others, like Hera, simmering with plans yet unseen. He realized quickly that no ordinary labor would suffice. The ground was thick with muck so deep that his boots sank with every step, and the air was alive with the buzzing of flies that swarmed like tiny shadows. The task seemed endless, but Hercules was not a man to be daunted by mountains of manure. Instead of attempting the impossible by hand, he turned his gaze toward the mountains that framed the plains, where two rivers, Alpheus and Peneus, rushed swift and sure, their waters cold and unrelenting. With a cunning smile, he set to work redirecting their flow, carving new channels through the earth with his bare hands and mighty strength. The water roared down the newly forged paths, flooding the stables with a cleansing torrent that swept away decades of filth in rushing waves. The sight was both terrifying and magnificent. Muddy water churned like a river in fury, carrying the stench and waste out to the fields beyond, leaving behind clean floors and the sharp scent of fresh earth. The labor took every ounce of Hercules' strength and patience, the chill of the rushing rivers biting through his cloak and armor, his muscles burning from the strain of shaping the land itself. All day long he worked, sweat and water mingling on his skin, his breath coming in steady, determined bursts. Villagers gathered at a cautious distance, eyes wide as they witnessed the impossible made real, the hero bending nature to his will. Yet even as the sun dipped toward the horizon and the last traces of filth were swept away, Augeas refused to honor his word, his greed blinding him to the truth. He claimed that Hercules had cheated, that the rivers themselves had done the work and that no true labor had been performed. Enraged but undeterred, Hercules declared that justice would have its due, and soon the dispute led to a war that toppled Augeas' reign and restored honor to the hero's name. This labor, unlike the beasts felled or the battles won, was a test of mind and spirit as much as muscle, a reminder that the greatest challenges are not always those faced with sword or club but those requiring cunning and unyielding will. And above the plains of Elis, the gods continued their watch, the strands of fate twisting ever tighter around the lion-cloaked figure who marched steadily toward immortality. The dark waters of Lake Stymphalus lay still beneath a sky mottled with gathering clouds, a surface so quiet it seemed to hold its breath in uneasy anticipation. The air here was thick with the scent of wet earth and decaying reeds, and from the shadows of the dense surrounding forest came faint, haunting calls, sharp cries that sent a chill crawling down Hercules' spine. These were the domain of the Stymphalian birds, creatures said to be part man, part fowl, with wings that spread wide like the sails of a storm-battered ship and beaks sharp as the finest swords. Their feathers were a polished sheen of metal, glinting coldly even in the fading light, and their eyes burned with a cunning intelligence that spoke of malice as old as the forests themselves. For years, the birds had terrorized the countryside, swooping down in murderous flocks to shred crops, peck at cattle, and drive even the bravest men from their homes. Farmers spoke in hushed whispers of entire villages left desolate, the air darkened by the beating of countless wings. Hercules stood at the edge of the lake, his breath slow and steady, his muscles coiled like a panther ready to spring. He knew that brute strength alone would not be enough to face creatures that could take to the skies and strike like lightning. His keen eyes scanned the tangled reeds and twisted trees that lined the water's edge, searching for any sign of movement. Suddenly, a sharp metallic clang echoed through the stillness, and the air erupted with a terrifying chorus of cries as the birds took flight in a swirling cloud of feathers and fury. Their wings beat the air like thunder, a storm made flesh and fury, casting sharp shadows that danced across the surface of the lake. Hercules raised his arms, reaching for the bronze castanets crafted by Hephaestus himself, gifts from the god of fire and forge, their clamor designed to frighten and scatter the winged menace. The noise shattered the air, a clattering cacophony that sent the birds into a confused frenzy. Screeches and flapping filled the sky as the creatures took to erratic flight, their metal feathers glinting like shards of broken glass. Seizing the moment, Hercules drew his bow, steadying his breath as he let fly arrow after arrow, each finding its mark with deadly precision. The birds fell from the sky in clattering heaps, their cries fading into the stillness once more. Yet the battle was far from over. Some of the survivors regrouped, diving toward him with razor-sharp talons and savage cries, forcing Hercules to duck and parry with his great club, each blow ringing like a bell forged in war. The dance of death wove through the twilight woods, the hero's strength and skill tested like never before. At one point, a particularly bold bird lunged, its beak snapping just inches from his face, and Hercules grinned, the thrill of the fight lighting his eyes like wildfire. "Is that all you've got?" he shouted, swinging his club in a wide arc that sent feathers and sparks flying. As the last of the birds fell, silence settled over the lake once more, broken only by the heavy breaths of the victor and the distant croak of a lone frog. Hercules gathered the fallen feathers as proof of his conquest, knowing that Eurystheus would need undeniable evidence before he could rest. The labor had tested his agility as much as his strength, teaching him that every challenge demanded a new kind of courage, a willingness to face not only the beast but the unpredictable winds of fate. Far above, the gods murmured their approval, the threads of destiny weaving tighter around the son of Zeus. Hera, watching still with narrowed eyes, smiled a smile that promised storms yet to come, her fury as constant as the tides. The salt-sprayed winds of the Aegean carried Hercules' ship gently toward the rocky shores of Crete, the island's rugged cliffs rising like the jagged teeth of some ancient beast biting into the sky. The sun glinted off restless waves, casting silver ribbons across the sea's surface as gulls wheeled overhead, their cries sharp and echoing. The task before Hercules was one that whispered through the halls of myth, a great bull, fierce and untamed, with eyes like molten fire and strength that could shake the earth beneath its hooves. This beast had been sent by Poseidon himself as both gift and curse, a symbol of power and wildness bound to the island's very soul. Landing at the harbor of Knossos, Hercules felt the weight of the island's ancient magic pressing around him, thick as the salt in the air. The locals watched with a mix of awe and fear, for the bull had torn through villages, uprooted olive groves, and sent even the bravest warriors fleeing like frightened lambs. The ground bore the scars of its rampage, deep gouges in the earth, shattered stones, and broken fences strewn like toothpicks after a feast. Hercules made his way toward the creature's last known haunt, the rocky plains beneath Mount Ida, where the earth seemed scorched and cracked, as if bearing the marks of the bull's furious charge. As he approached, the distant thunder of hooves grew louder, a rhythmic pounding that echoed in his chest like a drumbeat of war. Suddenly, the bull burst from a thicket of brambles, muscles rippling beneath slick hide, nostrils flaring steam in the cool air. Its eyes locked on Hercules with a primal intelligence, challenging and wild. Without hesitation, Hercules met its charge, stepping forward to meet the beast's fury with a calm as steady as the mountain itself. The clash was earth-shattering. Horns met shoulder, breath steamed in the cold air, and dust rose in swirling clouds around them. Hercules grappled with the bull, his hands finding purchase on its thick neck as they rolled across the rugged terrain, each trying to claim dominance. The bull's strength was immense, but Hercules' resolve was fiercer. With a mighty roar, he seized the beast by the horns and twisted, driving it to submission through sheer force of will. When the dust settled, the bull stood calm beside him, its wild fire tempered by the hero's steady grip. Hercules led the creature back across the island, the people watching in stunned silence as the once feared terror now followed obediently like a tamed storm. The bull would later find new purpose, offered to the gods, its strength a testament to the hero's triumph over raw power and chaos. Yet in the quiet moments beneath the stars, Hercules felt the wildness still pulsing beneath the beast's skin, a reminder that some forces, no matter how subdued, never lose their fire. The gods murmured their praise from Olympus, while Hera's gaze burned with a quiet fury, her plots weaving ever tighter as the son of Zeus moved closer to his destiny. The dawn broke pale and silver over the rugged cliffs of Thrace, where the wind carried the bitter tang of salt and wild herbs, and the cry of distant hawks echoed over the jagged landscape. Hercules stood at the edge of a great plain, the ground beneath his feet cracked and dry, scattered with bones bleached by sun and time. Here, the infamous mares of Diams roamed, for wild horses of enormous size, their eyes blazing with a savage intelligence, manes tangled like storm clouds, and hooves that struck the earth like thunder. These were no ordinary beasts. Born of war and fed on human flesh, the mares were said to be impossible to tame, their hunger as relentless as the harsh Thracian winter. Their master, Diams, was a cruel king, a man as savage as the creatures he bred, delighting in the terror they sowed across the land. Villagers told tales in fearful whispers of caravans ambushed, of warriors dragged screaming to their doom beneath the hooves of those monstrous horses. Hercules felt the weight of the task settle upon him like a dark cloud. He knew that brute strength alone would not win this labor. Cunning and courage must walk hand in hand. Approaching Diam's fortress, a grim stone stronghold crowned with twisted banners, Hercules' eyes narrowed as guards spotted him and rushed forth, weapons drawn. With a roar like a storm unleashed, Hercules cut through the attackers, his lion's cloak billowing like a banner of defiance. Inside the walls, Diams awaited, a towering figure clad in dark bronze armor, his gaze as cold and hard as the iron of his sword. "So, the son of Zeus dares to claim my mares," he sneered, voice like grinding stones. "You will find them wilder than any god or mortal can tame." Hercules stepped forward, muscles coiled and eyes blazing with fierce determination. "I do not seek to tame them by force, but by will," he replied, voice steady as a mountain stream. The stables reeked of sweat and blood, and from within came the thunderous stamping of hooves. As the gates swung open, the mares burst forth, their nostrils flaring, eyes wild with fury and hunger. The battle was a tempest of hooves and muscle, the air filled with the thunderous pounding as Hercules dodged strikes, his great club swinging in wide arcs that shattered bones and sent shockwaves through the earth. But the key lay not in fighting, but in strategy. Hercules seized Diam's, hurling him to the ground and binding him with heavy chains. As the tyrant king was dragged toward the horses, their savage hunger turned upon their master, their teeth tearing into the flesh that had fed their cruelty. With Diam subdued, the mares, their rage quelled, calmed under Hercules' steady hand. He led them away from the fortress, their wild eyes now reflecting not fear but a grudging respect. The road back was long and fraught with peril, but the hero's resolve never wavered. Villagers who had cowered from the beasts now watched in or as Hercules rode past, the monstrous horses transformed from terror to testament of his unyielding will. Yet, as always, Heros' shadow lingered, a dark thread in the tapestry of his fate, weaving challenges yet unseen. The sea breeze carried the scent of salt and wildflowers as Hercules' ship cut through the waves toward the distant shores of the land of the Amazons, a realm whispered of in legends and songs, a land ruled by fierce warrior women, proud as lions and swift as hawks. The island lay shrouded in mist, its dense forests rising like emerald towers, hiding secrets and dangers beneath their leafy canopy. Among these warriors was Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons, renowned for her strength, courage, and the magnificent girdle bestowed upon her by Ars himself, the god of war. The girdle was more than a simple belt. It was a symbol of authority, power, and divine favor, said to grant its wearer the might to command legions and tame even the wildest of storms. As Hercules approached the Amazon camp, the warriors stood like statues carved from bronze and steel, their eyes sharp and unyielding. The air hummed with the tension of impending conflict, yet also with a strange sense of respect, for even these fierce women knew the name of Hercules, son of Zeus, hero of legend. When he finally stood before Hippolyta, her gaze met his with the calm of a storm barely restrained. Her voice was clear and strong, a melody laced with steel. "Why do you come to our land, stranger? To fight or to bargain?" Hercules, proud but respectful, spoke of the task laid upon him by King Eurystheus, the quest to claim her girdle and bring it back as a token of his strength. Hippolyta studied him a moment, then smiled, a rare, flickering thing that held both warmth and warning. "If it is strength you seek, prove it. But know this, the girdle is not given lightly." In the days that followed, Hercules and Hippolyta shared moments that blurred the lines between foe and friend. He learned of the Amazons' fierce loyalty to their land and each other, their stories of battles fought and honor won. They sparred beneath ancient oaks, their weapons clashing in a dance of power and grace, each testing the other's mettle with laughter and fierce determination. But fate, as ever, is a tangled web. Hera, lurking like a shadow in the wings of the tail, stirred unrest among the Amazons, whispering lies and fanning flames of suspicion. The warriors, once open to parley, turned wary and hostile, their spears raised against the intruder who sought their queen's prized possession. In the chaos, what began as a negotiation erupted into battle. The clash of bronze rang through the forest, the ground trembling beneath the fury of warriors unmatched in skill and courage. Hercules fought with the strength of storms, but also with a heart heavy with regret. As the dust settled, Hippolyta, recognizing the hero's valor and honor, surrendered the girdle. Yet not without a warning that power is a flame to be wielded wisely, lest it consume all. Bearing the girdle, Hercules left the land of the Amazons, the weight of the task heavy in both his hands and his soul. The labor was more than a conquest. It was a lesson in respect, trust, and the fragile line between war and peace. Above, the gods watched, their voices a murmur in the winds, and Hera's smile was a blade hidden beneath silk, ready to strike when the moment came. The sun scorched the endless plains of the far west, where the earth cracked and shimmered under a sky so wide it seemed to swallow the horizon whole. Hercules journeyed toward the distant land of Erythea, a place whispered of with both fear and fascination, where the monstrous Geryon dwelled. Geryon was no ordinary man but a giant with 3 bodies joined at the waist, each with its own pair of arms and legs, a titan of strength and power who ruled over a herd of magnificent red cattle that grazed on the blood-stained plains. The cattle were said to be as numerous as the stars, their hides gleaming like burnished copper, their strength unmatched by any beast in the known world. As Hercules crossed harsh deserts and rocky mountains, the weight of the labor settled heavy upon him, the memory of battles past mingling with the heat and dust that clung to his skin. The journey was long and perilous, each step a test of endurance as the hero pressed forward through lands where even the winds seemed hostile. Upon arrival, the sight that met him was as terrifying as the stories foretold. Geryon stood atop a rocky promontory, his 3 bodies flexing in unison like the fierce beating of a triple drum. His voice boomed across the plains, a thunderous challenge that shook the air. "Who dares approach my cattle, thief of the gods?" Hercules answered with steady courage, "I am Hercules, son of Zeus, here to claim what is mine by task and fate." The battle that followed was a dance of titans. Geryon struck with arms like tree trunks, each body moving with terrifying coordination. But Hercules, with the strength of storms and the cunning born of countless trials, dodged and countered, each blow landing with the force of mountains crashing. As the sun dipped low, the battle reached its climax, Hercules driving his sword through the heart of the giant, his bodies collapsing in a thunderous heap upon the blood-stained earth. With the master defeated, the herdsman Eurytion appeared, seeking to defend the cattle with fierce resolve. But Hercules was relentless, his great club and unyielding will overcoming every obstacle. Gathering the prized cattle, Hercules began the arduous trek home, the beasts lowing softly as if sensing the hero's strength and honor. The journey back was no less fraught, as bandits and wild beasts alike sought to claim the magnificent herd. But Hercules' courage and might held firm, the cattle trailing behind like a living river of red. Each step brought him closer to the end of the labors, each breath a reminder of the destiny that awaited. Above the burning plains, the gods whispered in wind and flame, their voices weaving fate's tapestry, while Hera's eyes burned with the fire of unyielding hatred, her plots darkening like storm clouds ready to break. The sun dipped low behind the western mountains, spilling molten gold across the rippling waves of the sea, as Hercules set sail toward a land wrapped in mystery and legend, the distant realm of the Hesperides. This was no ordinary journey, for the garden he sought was said to lie beyond the edge of the world, guarded by enchantments as old as time itself. The golden apples it held were not mere fruit but treasures of the gods, gifts of immortality and power, coveted by many but claimed by few. The garden's caretakers were the Hesperides, nymphs of twilight whose laughter was like the tinkling of distant bells and whose beauty was as radiant as the evening star. Yet guarding the apples was the greatest challenge. Ladin, a dragon with 100 shimmering heads, each breathing venomous fire, coils that writhed like living shadows beneath the sacred trees. As Hercules' ship cut through the sea's glassy surface, the air thickened with magic, and the boundary between mortal and divine blurred. His heart pounded with anticipation and a reverence born of the sacredness of his quest. Upon arrival, Hercules found the garden lush beyond imagining. Trees heavy with golden fruit, their leaves whispering secrets in the soft breeze, and flowers that glowed with an otherworldly light. Yet the tranquility was shattered by the sinister hiss and flicker of Ladin's many heads, eyes gleaming like molten jewels, watching every step with deadly vigilance. Hercules moved with careful determination, knowing that brute force alone would not defeat such a guardian. His mind raced through tales and whispers, recalling that Atlas, the titan who bore the heavens upon his shoulders, was the father of the nymphs and keeper of the golden apples. Seeking counsel, Hercules found Atlas resting beneath the sky's vast dome, his figure vast and weary, shoulders bowed but spirit unbroken. "Mighty Atlas," Hercules began, voice respectful yet firm, "I seek the golden apples of the Hesperides. Will you grant me aid in this labor?" Atlas's eyes sparkled with a mixture of weariness and challenge. "If you can bear the weight of the heavens for but a moment, the apples shall be yours to claim." With a nod, Hercules stepped forward, shouldering the immense burden with a groan that echoed across the land. The sky seemed to press down, a crushing weight of stars and clouds, but Hercules stood firm, muscles straining like ancient oaks in a storm. Atlas, relieved of his burden, went in search of the apples, returning with the precious fruit, each glowing like captured sunlight. Yet, as the Titan prepared to reclaim his celestial load, Hercules' cunning stirred. "Would you not carry this weight a while longer, great Atlas, while I secure the apples safely?" he asked with a sly smile. The Titan, eager for respite, agreed, but Hercules' grip tightened like iron, and with a roar, he lifted the heavens once more, freeing the apples for his journey home. The return was fraught with care, for the apple's magic was potent and coveted. The labor was a testament not only to Hercules' strength but to his wit, a dance between might and mind that marked his path toward legend. Above, the gods watched with quiet awe, their voices a chorus woven into the very winds, while Heros' eyes burned with a cold fire, ever scheming in the shadows of fate. The gates of the underworld yawned wide beneath a sky drained of stars, a threshold into realms where shadows clung like thick fog and silence pressed heavy as a tombstone. Hercules, draped in his lion's cloak and armed with his unyielding spirit, stood at the edge of this dark kingdom, a land where no mortal dared tread without the blessing or wrath of the gods. His final labor awaited him here, a test not of beasts or earthly challenges, but of courage against death itself. Before him lay Cerberus, the monstrous three-headed hound, guardian of Hades' realm, whose eyes blazed with fiery menace and whose snarling jaws could crush the spirits of the dead and living alike. The beast's breath was a noxious wind, its body a mountain of muscle and shadow, each head snapping with fury and vigilance. Hercules knew this labor demanded more than strength. It required respect for the dark powers, resolve to face the unknown, and a heart unshaken by fear. As he stepped through the veil of gloom, the air grew cold and thick, whispers of lost souls swirling like autumn leaves caught in an eternal storm. The underworld's bleak landscape stretched out in all directions, rivers of sorrow and forgetfulness winding through shadows that danced with a life of their own. At the throne of Hades, the Lord of the Dead himself regarded Hercules with a gaze that was both warning and curiosity. "Son of Zeus," Hades intoned, voice echoing like distant thunder, "you seek to claim my guardian as your prize. Will you face the darkness and emerge unbroken?" Hercules met his gaze steadily. "I do not seek to steal, but to prove my worth and fulfill the fate set before me." With a nod, Hades granted permission, warning that should Hercules fail, he would join the ranks of the lost forever. The moment came when Cerberus appeared, a living nightmare of muscle and teeth, its three heads snarling and snapping, eyes blazing like coals in the dark. The beast lunged with terrifying speed, but Hercules stood firm, dodging snarls and biting jaws with the grace of a seasoned warrior. With calm strength, he grasped the massive necks, one hand on each head, his grip like a vice forged in thunder and will. The battle was a tempest of snarls, growls, and the clash of wills, a dance of life and death beneath the weight of the underworld's silent gaze. Slowly, Hercules' unyielding hold tamed the beast's fury until Cerberus' snarls softened into low rumbles of submission. Together, they walked from the depths into the world above, the shadows retreating before the light of dawn breaking across the horizon. The hero's heart pounded with triumph and relief, for he had faced death itself and emerged victorious, the final labor completed in a crescendo of strength, courage, and destiny fulfilled. As he returned Cerberus to Hades' realm, the gates closed behind them with a solemn finality, marking the end of one journey and the beginning of legend. The gods on Olympus whispered in awe and approval, their voices mingling with the winds of fate, while Heros' fury simmered beneath the surface, a tempest still brewing but slowed by the tide of destiny's unstoppable flow. After the thunderous conclusion of the 12 labors, Hercules found himself standing at a crossroads where mortal toil met divine fate. The weight of his deeds pressed upon him like the lion's pelt still draped across his shoulders, a symbol of strength earned through trials that had tested every fiber of his being. Yet, even as the crowds of mortals hailed him as a hero, whispers lingered in the wind, whispers of challenges yet unseen, of friendships forged in fire and betrayals cold as winter's breath. Among the first to cross his path was Iolaus, his steadfast nephew and companion through many trials. Their bond was one forged not only in blood but in shared hardship and quiet moments beneath starlit skies. Iolaus' laughter was a balm to Hercules' wearied soul, his counsel steady as the northern star, and together they navigated the tangled web of mortal politics and divine intrigue. One evening, as the sun bled crimson behind the hills, the two sat beside a crackling fire, sharing tales of battles past and dreams of peace. "Nephew," Hercules said, voice soft beneath the roar of flames, "these labors have made me stronger, but I feel the weight of destiny pressing still. Tell me, what lies ahead for a man who has walked so close to godhood?" Iolaus smiled, eyes reflecting the dancing firelight. Perhaps, cousin, the greatest battles are those fought within, the fight for honor, for love, for a legacy beyond mere strength. Yet not all who crossed Hercules' path bore friendship in their hearts. The goddess Hera, whose fury had long shadowed him, continued to weave her intricate plots, seeking to ensnare the hero in webs of sorrow and despair. Her subtle manipulations reached even mortal courts, twisting allies into foes and casting doubts that gnawed at Hercules' spirit. In one dark twist, a trusted companion turned traitor, lured by promises whispered in the quiet halls of Olympus. The sting of betrayal was sharp, a wound that no mortal strength could easily heal. But Hercules, ever resilient, found solace in moments of quiet reflection and the unwavering loyalty of those who stood by him. His journey beyond the labors was not only a saga of might but a profound tale of growth, of learning that even the strongest must bend to fate's will and that true power lies not just in muscle but in heart. Slowly, the son of Zeus felt the stirrings of something greater within, a transformation beckoning from the horizon of his mortal life. Whispers spoke of his eventual ascent, the shedding of flesh and blood to join the pantheon above, a god among gods. Yet this path was neither swift nor easy. It was marked by love found and lost, battles fought in shadows, and the quiet moments where a hero must face himself. The gods watched with bated breath, some with admiration, others with envy and fear, as Hercules stepped ever closer to his destiny, his tale weaving through the tapestry of legend like a golden thread catching the light. After the thunder and glory of the labors, Hercules found a rare moment of peace in the gentle hills near Thebes, where wildflowers nodded in the breeze and the sky stretched wide and endless above. Here, in the quiet of the countryside, he was joined by his steadfast friend and nephew, Iolaus, whose presence was a constant anchor in the swirling storm of Hercules' life. One warm evening, the two sat beside a crackling fire beneath a tapestry of stars, their voices low in the soft hush of night. "Iolaus," Hercules began, his voice heavy with unspoken weariness. "Though the gods have tested me and the world hails my strength, I find myself wondering what lies beyond the battles. Is there a path to peace for a man like me?" Iolaus smiled, tossing a twig into the flames. "Peace, cousin, may come not from the absence of struggle but from the bonds we forge, friends who stand with us, and a love that lights the darkest nights." It was in this spirit that Hercules met Deianira, a woman of fierce spirit and gentle heart, whose beauty was like the dawn breaking over stormy seas, radiant, unpredictable, and stirring. Their meeting was marked by the clash of fate and fire, as Hercules saved her from a band of marauders, his strength a shield against the chaos. Deianira's eyes, deep pools of emotion, held both gratitude and a fierce spark that drew the hero close. Their love blossomed like a wild rose, beautiful but edged with thorns. Yet beneath the warmth of their union, shadows gathered. Hera's malice seeped into mortal affairs like poison, and even the gods watched with wary eyes as the story of Hercules and Deianira wove toward tragedy. The tale twisted when the centaur Nessus, whose fate was sealed by his own dark desires, offered Deianira a poisoned gift disguised as love's safeguard, a tunic steeped in venom and deceit. Hercules, unaware of the snare laid upon him, wore the garment with tragic consequences, the poison burning through flesh and spirit alike. In his agony, the hero's roar echoed through the mountains, a sound both terrifying and heartbreakingly human. Deianira's grief was a tempest. Her love turned to despair as she realized the role her gift had played in his suffering. Yet even in this darkest hour, Hercules' spirit burned bright, the strength of his heart refusing to yield. With the help of his loyal friends and the mercy of the gods, his final moments became not just an end but a passage, a shedding of mortal pain and the beginning of his ascent to Olympus. The gods welcomed him with open arms, his mortal trials transformed into eternal honor, a place among the stars where his name would be sung forever. And so, the story of Hercules moves beyond the realm of men, a legend woven from strength and sorrow, friendship and love, betrayal and redemption, a tapestry endless as the night sky and as bright as the dawn. As Hercules crossed the shimmering threshold from mortal realm to divine, the very air seemed to pulse with a radiant energy, thick with the fragrance of ambrosia and the soft murmur of eternal voices. Olympus unfolded before him like a vast palace of light and shadow, where marble columns soared to endless skies and gardens bloomed with flowers that never withered, their petals whispering secrets older than time. The gods gathered, their eyes bright with curiosity and respect as the mortal who had earned his place among them stepped forward. Zeus, his thunderbolt poised like a crown of lightning, regarded his son with a father's pride tempered by the wisdom of ages. "Welcome, Hercules," he thundered, his voice like rolling storms. "You have endured trials no man could bear and shown a heart worthy of immortality." Among the deities, Heros' gaze softened, no longer the spiteful force that had shadowed his mortal days, but a complex weave of respect and lingering caution. The great hall filled with the murmur of greetings, the flicker of smiles, and the warmth of bonds newly forged. Hercules, once bound by mortal limits, found himself learning the rhythms of godhood, the slow dance of power and grace, the weaving of fate, and the balance of compassion and strength. He forged friendships with Athena, goddess of wisdom, whose sharp mind challenged his strength with clever riddles and shared counsel beneath olive trees that glowed with silver light. Apollo, radiant as the sun's first dawn, welcomed him with music and laughter, their conversations echoing like gentle waves on marble halls. Even Deianira, wild god of revelry, offered moments of unrestrained joy, where laughter spilled like wine and worries melted into the night. Yet with divinity came new challenges, responsibilities heavier than any club or battle. Hercules learned that gods held not just power, but the weight of worlds, the delicate balance of human fate, and the unending dance of cosmos and chaos. His mortal heart, tempered by suffering and love, gave him a unique place among the immortals, a bridge between earth and sky, flesh and spirit. Stories grew of his deeds on Olympus, times he stood between gods to ease disputes, moments when his laughter brought warmth to cold halls, and the quiet compassion he showed to mortal heroes still struggling beneath the stars. His name became a beacon, a symbol that even the greatest trials could be overcome, that strength without heart was empty, and that redemption was always possible. Yet the legacy of Hercules was not only in tales and songs but in the mortal world, where his adventures inspired countless souls to face their own shadows with courage and hope. The constellations traced his form across the night sky, his lion cloak blazing among the stars as a reminder that legends never truly fade. They live on in the hearts of those who dare to dream and endure. And so, the son of Zeus, once mortal and burdened by pain, became immortal and eternal, a hero not just of strength but of spirit, his story a timeless lullaby whispered to those seeking courage in the dark. Though immortal, Hercules' heart remained bound to the mortal world, and many tales tell of the moments when he crossed the veil to walk among men once more, lending his strength and wisdom to those in need. In one such story, Hercules came upon a village plagued by a terrible drought, the earth cracked and barren beneath a relentless sun that withered crops and broke spirits alike. The villagers, gaunt and desperate, had lost all hope. Approaching with the quiet power of a coming storm, Hercules listened to their pleas beneath the cracked skies. With a solemn nod, he lifted his mighty hands to the heavens, calling upon Zeus's favor. Clouds gathered swiftly, rolling across the horizon like waves of dark velvet, and thunder rumbled low and deep. The first drops fell, a gentle patter that soon grew into a life-giving rain, soaking the thirsty earth, reviving green shoots, and filling rivers once more. The villagers rejoiced, their songs rising into the sky, a testament to the hero who bridged mortal and divine realms. In another tale, Hercules found himself challenged by a new foe, not a beast of claw or fang, but a spirit of sorrow named Melancholia, who whispered doubts and fears into the hearts of even the strongest. The struggle was not of muscle but of will, a battle of light against shadow within the soul. Hercules' laughter, bright and fierce, became his weapon, shattering the dark tendrils with the warmth of hope and unyielding courage. Such stories remind us that even gods wrestle with the shadows within, and that true strength lies in facing both the world and oneself. Among the gods, Hercules' place grew not only as a warrior but as a guardian of balance, a protector of both joy and sorrow, strength and vulnerability. He taught that might was noble only when tempered with kindness, and that even immortals could learn from mortal frailty. His friendships deepened, and his laughter echoed through Olympus's halls, a beacon of resilience and light. And thus, the legend of Hercules, forever flowing and expanding, became a river of stories, some fierce as storms, others soft as twilight, inviting all who hear them to find courage, hope, and strength within their own hearts. The skies above Olympus blushed softly with the light of dusk, a gentle sigh of twilight that wrapped the world in hues of rose and lavender. Hercules stood upon a marble balcony overlooking the vast expanse of mortal lands below, where rivers wound like silver ribbons through forests and valleys bathed in the fading sun's glow. The lion's pelt still rested upon his broad shoulders, a silent testament to battles fought and strength earned, not just of muscle, but of heart and spirit. Around him, the murmurs of the gods drifted like warm winds, a chorus of voices woven into the fabric of time itself. Zeus's booming laughter echoed faintly from distant halls. Athena's wise gaze lingered like a steady flame. Apollo's melodies wove through the evening air like golden threads of light. Hercules breathed deeply, feeling the coolness of the air mingle with the lingering warmth of the day, a balance much like the one he had found within himself after years of toil and triumph. In this quiet moment, the hero was neither mortal nor god but something more, a bridge between worlds, a legend alive in the hearts of all who dared to dream and endure. Memories stirred like gentle ripples across the surface of a still lake, the fierce clashes with monsters, the friendships forged in fire, the betrayals that had tested his soul, and the love that both healed and haunted him. Each thread of his story shimmered, not as an ending, but as part of an endless tapestry that stretched across the stars. Above, the constellations took shape, Leo the lion roaring proudly across the night sky, a celestial monument to courage and strength. And beneath those stars, countless voices whispered the name of Hercules, a lullaby sung in many tongues, a tale passed from mother to child, from dreamer to dreamer. That is the end of tonight's tales. Thank you for listening and good night.